Hello and welcome to my fourth playthrough of Pacific War. Today we're having a look at engagement scenario number 4, which is the invasion of Burma that happened in February 1942. So, not so many new concepts are introduced in this scenario. The difference from the early ones is that we have 2 battle cycles we're going to be playing, and we will be introduced to the ground unit movement. Ground unit movement is a rather simple concept. Every ground unit has 6 movement points. To move, you pay the entry cost to enter an hex, and the costs are for clear hex, it's 2 movement points. For jungle or hill, it's 3 movement points, or into a mixed hex, it's 6 movement points. Unless you're moving along a transport route. Transport routes are roads, railroads, and rivers. If you cross a hex side along one of these 3, then you only pay 2 movement points. And all 3 are actually in view on this map. So we have a river here, we have a railroad there, and we have an ordinary road here. To embark or disembark costs 6 movement points. And then there is army units. There are none in the scenario, but for movement rule completeness, I just mentioned that armored units, they can only move along transport routes unless they enter a clear hex, in which case they pay 2 movement points. So in order to win this scenario, the Japanese player has to control Rangoon by the end of the scenario. I also realized there are a few more things regarding movement that is worth mentioning now. So there is a stacking limitation, and the stacking limitation is 48 steps of ground units from each side, meaning that the maximum theoretical maximum is 96. Also, when entering an enemy-occupied hex, you have to stop movement immediately. There is also the concept of overrun, and that is if a base unit is alone in the hex, it gets overrun when an enemy combat unit enters the hex. I will also briefly mention the other things that you can overrun. You can overrun coast prosperity spheres and homeland resource hexes. I won't mention these any further because they are part of a concept that comes later in the rules when we start playing strategic scenarios. Also there you can overrun offensive support bases, same thing there. It's a later concept. And enemy anchorages you can also overrun. And normally when you overrun something, the units there, like ships or aircraft, get destroyed. So let's begin the scenario. So the first phase we're in is the lighting phase, and it's already decided for both battle cycles it's daytime, so we can continue to advantage determination. Same thing there, the Japanese player has the advantage according to the scenario. And then we come to the phase of advantage movement. So the Japanese player only has 2 ground units, 2 divisions, and they start moving from here. So they pay 2, 4, and they enter the enemy hex, and then they're forced to stop there. Even though they have 2 more movement points, they can't use them. And also we have to mark the hex side from which they entered, like this. So that has impact on retreats and it's a good reminder that you moved into the hex. So had we had any more ground units, we would move those 2, but these are all the Japanese have. The next thing we do is advantage air mission. So I've been debating a bit with myself what to attack and when and so forth. I haven't made that thorough research, but of course I think we should try to break the British unit here to make the combat successful, probably. Then I've been thinking if I should attack the Flying Tigers or if I should start breaking these units in Rangoon. I feel the Flying Tigers are such a threat. They have a air-to-ground capability of 4, which could break one of my units, and that would probably make it impossible for me to take Rangoon, or at least very, very difficult. Anyhow, so for sure I will attack the British unit here. So we decide to make an airstrike at that hex. So we are in the air mission preliminary procedure. So we designate where the airstrike is happening, and then we decide what units are participating. And I'm only using this twin-engine bomber here. And it's coordinated because it's 1 counter-attacking, and the range is 7, and we have a range of 16, so we can easily go there and back. Well, easily. we're going to be using 14 of the 16. Anyhow, so it flies to the hex to attack, and when they enter the hex, we do the search. So searching for air daytime, we have to roll a 6 or less on the Allied search chart. Remember, they are different, so use the correct chart. And we roll a 4, so the airstrike is detected, meaning that flak will happen before the airstrike. So if we continue with the air mission procedure schematic, we have done the MOVE mission air units. We have established that the flight is detected, and then we have to designate strike targets. And the strike target is the Burmese division. The next thing that happens is combat air patrol procedure, and since there are no Allied aircraft in the hex, we skip this and we move to flak procedure. So the flak in the hex is 1 from the Burmese and 1 from the small base, so for a total of 2. And we roll a 3, and a 3 is a miss. The easiest way to know if it's a miss is actually if you have 2 in strength, then you have to roll 2 or less. That's common for most every type of combat, I mean. So the flak on the unimproved versus air is unsuccessful, and then we move to the next step, which is strike or strike procedure. And the Japanese has a air-to-ground strength of 5, and we roll. And we roll a 0. And if you check the Air Naval Combat Results table, we see that the result is a troop quality check. So the Burmese unit has a troop quality of 2, so we have to roll 2 or less. And we roll a 9, meaning it fails and it's broken. And then we do the air mission conclusion procedure, so the Japanese bomber returns to its base. And then if it had, we would have been forced to, since it's only 1 unit there, the reorganization is not going to happen. So the first airstrike is successful, and then we move to the next air mission. And we start with air mission preliminary procedure, and in this case we're going to attack the Flying Tigers, and this time we're going to do another mission, which is air supremacy. So this is a mission types we haven't done before, so the difference here is the intention, of course, is to engage the enemy air units in air combat. The limitations are that only fighter type of aircraft can participate, and they have to be level 1 or level 2. In this case, our fighter is level 1, so it's okay to do the air supremacy mission. Why would you do this? Well, you actually use a better line on the Air Naval Combat Results table, air supremacy versus cap, so there is a greater chance you inflict some losses on the enemy when you do this type of mission. And if the British players can't find me, then I'm allowed to strafe him on the airfield instead of doing air-to-air combat. So all in all, it's a good thing. So also in the air mission preliminary procedures, we conclude that this flight is coordinated. And like we learned before, it's only 1 counter and it's always coordinated. So then we move to the next phase, which is move mission air units. And here are some things we have to consider. If we go straight for the target, we're going to fly over this hex, and then the Allied player is going to get an extra search in this hex, meaning the chances of this aircraft here alerting increase because they're going to be searching here, and then they're going to be searching here again. So actually what we're going to do, since we have a range of 8, we're going to make a slight detour, so we're going to move 1, 2, 3, 4 into the hex. That way they only get 1 search, and we have a greater chance of surprising him and not letting him alert. So this one enters the hex. And same procedure, we move to the search, and 6 or less for the Allied to find him. And they roll a 9. Okay. Meaning that the Flying Tigers stay on the ground and are not alerted. So the next thing we're going to do is designate targets, and we are going to strafe the Flying Tigers. Then we're going to do the strike procedure. or the strafe procedure. So we have an air-to-air rating of 5, and we roll. And we roll a 9, so that's nothing. And then there is flak, the flak procedure. And the flak strength is 1 due to the small base in the hex. And we roll a 5, so that's a miss. And then we go to the air mission conclusion procedure, so the aircraft return to the hex. There is no reorganization, of course. Okay. That concludes the advantage air mission phase. Since there are no aircraft left that haven't flown, you can only fly once with each aircraft during this phase. When I say aircraft, of course, I mean formation, because every counter has a lot of aircraft. Like I think the fighter counter is representing something like 15 fighters or something like this. Anyhow, we move forward, and the next thing, the blue here, is naval. So this is not the case in this scenario, so we can skip those, and we move to the bombardment phase. This is also not happening since we have no naval units, and then we come to the ground combat phase. So there is only one ground combat going to happen in this phase. Had there been many, the operational player decides which combat we do first, but there is only one, so we continue. So we designate the lead units, and we're going to use the best troop quality Japanese unit, and of course there is only one allied unit, so these two are the lead units. Then we check the ratio, or the table for the troop qualities. And the Japanese has a troop quality of 6, and the allied player has a troop quality of 2, but because the unit is broken, it's halved, rounded up, meaning a 1. So it's 6 versus 1, and if you look, we will see that we are on the troop quality differential column of 18. Then we check the modifiers, and since the combat is happening in a jungle hex, we move 2 columns to the left, so from 18 to column 16. But if we have a look on the table, we see from 15 to 20, it's the same column. So that doesn't make our ability to fight deteriorate. So we go to 16, and then we check the ratio of units. And the Japanese player has 18 steps, and the defender has 10 steps. So the ratio is within the limit. There is no die roll modifier. So we roll, and the Japanese player rolls a 2, and we check the 2, and there are more than 17 steps, meaning the allied player is inflicted 7 hits or step losses, and the attacker loses none. So 7 hits, and then since the column where we rolled is red, it means that there is a mandatory retreat. And since this unit is broken, it's forced to retreat. And when it's forced to retreat, it receives an additional hit. So actually, it has 8 hits. But for the sake of learning, let's see what other things could have happened. In the case if this unit was not broken during combat, but the same result happened, then this unit, when it's a mandatory retreat, it is forced to make a troop quality check. And if it fails the troop quality check, then it has to retreat anyway and receive 1 extra hit and so forth. And then it becomes broken. But if it passes its troop quality check, the unit has 2 options. Either it stays in the hex and it doesn't receive an extra hit then, like it does when it's forced to retreat. Or it can decide to leave the hex and retreat voluntarily. And if it does this, its damage is actually halved, rounded up. So this is a good way of conserving units, is to retreat if you can afford to. Anyhow, the result was mandatory retreat, and the Burmese division failed the troop quality check. So it's forced to retreat, and we retreat into Rangoon. The next thing that happens is that the Allied airbase in the hex is destroyed, since there are no ground units with move capability left. So this one is destroyed, and we can remove this marker. It doesn't apply anymore. And then the Japanese move into the hex. Or not move, because they're already there, but we move the counters. Okay, but the combat is not over yet. So since the Allied was forced to retreat, the Japanese player can decide if it wants to pursue or not. And we want to do this because if we pursue, we can inflict extra damage on the Burmese unit. But in order to be able to pursue, we have to roll, and roll less than the troop quality, which is 6. So if we decide to pursue, and we roll a 6, meaning we can. So now the Japanese enter Ragoon Hex, and the Burmese unit gets extra hits. And actually what it gets is half what it got in the combat, which was 7, rounded up. So 3.5 rounded up to 4, and 4 is enough to completely destroy the Burmese division. But due to the pursuit, also the Japanese player receives 1 extra step loss. And then we do the air mission conclusion procedures, and the aircraft return to their bases. And the airstrike is done, and this one lands there. And that concludes the Advantage Air mission, and then we skip the naval combat cycle, and we skip the bombardment, and we enter ground combat. So we designate lead units, and this one is the lead unit for the Japanese, and the Rangoon battalion is the lead unit for the Allied player. So we have a troop quality of 6 versus a troop quality of 4. So that puts us in column 12. And then we modify this column. There are no broken units, and the hex is a jungle, so it reduces it from 12 to 10. And there is no die roll modifier because this steps divided by that is within the limit that there is none. So we are forced to roll on troop quality differential column of 10. And we roll an 8. And an 8 is disastrous for the Japanese. They get 4 step losses, and the defender gets 2 step losses. But the Japanese also is forced to have a mandatory retreat. So the lead Japanese unit has to take all damage, and it gets 9 step losses in all. And then the Allied player has to take 2 step losses. 1 goes to the lead unit, but since there are other units who can soak up damage, you don't have to destroy this. You put everything there up until it has 1 step less left. And then you can stop, and then you can distribute the other. And so let's put it on this 4, it becomes a 5. Okay, now we come to the mandatory retreat. So we have to roll a troop quality check for the Japanese lead unit, which is 6. And we roll a 0, so it succeeds in the troop quality check. So the Japanese player gets an option now. It can either stay in the hex and receive that many hits that it received, or it can decide to retreat, and if it does so, it wouldn't take all 4 hits. It would be reduced to 2 hits, and then it would have to be forced to move out of the hex. But then it's forced to deactivate. I mean, it doesn't matter. The Japanese players lost the scenario, but in the overall picture, I would probably try to stay. So we soak up the losses and stay in the hex. So that concludes the ground combat phase, and then we come to airfield repair and rally and disadvantage movement. So still the Japanese are in the hex, so the Allied player can't move any ground units. And then we have the disadvantage air mission phase. And if we think about the future, I would say the first air mission the Allied player would do is to try to destroy or put a lot of hurt on this fighter here. That's so that we do an air supremacy mission, and then we do an air mission preliminary procedure. We conclude this is coordinated since it's only one. And then it flies there, and the Japanese player gets to search, and they roll a 2, so they find the aircraft, meaning that they are alerted. So this is designated cap, and this is designated escort, actually. Anyway, they have to fight. So let's start with the Allied player. It has 6, but it has 6 steps, so it's modified to a 7. And we roll a 7. Was that a 7 or 1? Let's do 7. So that's 1 hit on the Japanese player. And then it returns fire. It has 5 minus 3. This one doesn't apply yet, so that's 2. And it gets no modifier, so column 2, and we roll a 4, that's a miss. That concludes the cap procedure. And then we have flak, and there is 1 base here, so it's a flak of 1. We roll an 8, so that's nothing. And the Flying Tiger unit returns to Rangoon. So I guess I couldn't live up to my historical counterparts. The Japanese, of course, managed to take Rangoon with some nice tactical movements and stuff like that. But today we failed, and the scenario's over. So next time we're going to look at engagement scenario number 5. And the number 5 is the battle for Impala and Koshima that happened in March 1944. So if you like what you see, please put a like and also consider subscribing, and see you in the next scenario. Bye bye.